is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Welcome into That Football Show, presented by our friends at Holiday Distillery and Ben Holiday, bottled in Bond Bourbon. I'm your host, Tucker Franklin, joined as always by Matty V, Matt Verderame. Matt, how you doing this week?
Doing well. Getting ready for vacation. How are you doing?
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I'm doing good. Making it through these barren times that we have for the NFL news and everything like that. Look, it's kind of an abstract episode, I guess, of That Football Show today. It's more a conceptually based show rather than a news based facts. It's still going to be facts based, but news based show, I should say. We're going to take a look at kind of putting this next season into perspective for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think it's a lot. You can get swept up in this a whole easy amount of ways. You can get swept up in this NFL season. Also going to talk about the 2022 draft class, or 2023, draft class. It's crazy. It's already 2024, by the way. Somebody mentioned something about 2025 being next year, and I just thought that was absurd, man.
Like a week ago, somebody said something to me about 30 years ago, and immediately in my head I was like, oh, and 30 years ago, yeah, so like what, like 80, and then it was like, no, actually, like 1994, and that horrified me to my core. As I turned 36 this summer, and I am about to be one with the elderly. I think I feel like that's where it's headed. So yes, time marches on, and I'm scared.
Clip that. Whoever is in charge of that, clip that part of it, because that is an evergreen, a little evergreen clip there. Yeah, they're talking about. I like to dabble in the WWE, right? I'm a big fan of professional wrestling, and they were talking about the 2025 Royal Rumble heading to Indianapolis. And I was like, oh, sick. That'll be in a couple of years. And then I looked at the calendar and I realized it's in a few months, actually. Like that's not that long away. February 1 of 2025 is not actually that far away.
No, it's not. So I have two kids, and that's when time really gets you. Yeah. You know, like my oldest daughter, she turns 7 in September, and oh my God. I mean, yes. But even in football terms, it's crazy. You think about like Mahomes this year, this would be his 7th season. Yes. You know, 7th season. It'll be 29 this season. Like, it's amazing how quickly these things go. And I guess that's kind of the beauty of it in some ways, but also it scares the hell out of you. It really does.
Yeah, it seems just yesterday Patrick Mahomes was starting his first season for the Chiefs. Now he's going into, what did you say, 7th season starting? 8th season in total?
Yes. Yeah. My God, it's his 8th season. Yeah, but 7th is a starter. Yeah.
Unreal. It is crazy to also think how young he is in terms of just like the achievements when you look at him up next to CBS Sports tweeted out the graphic about the probable starters for this year.
Right.
And in the Super Bowl wins, it's playoff wins too, I think is a part of it. It's crazy to think how young he is and what he's achieved, but also at the same time, he's like one of the more veteran quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yes. It's the greatest start to a career in NFL history.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, and for those who want to argue Brady, I mean, you could, but you'd be wrong because Brady didn't go to this many Super Bowls as quickly. Brady was amazing. Brady also did not, this early in his career, have 3 Super Bowl MVPs and 2 NFL MVPs and this many yards and this many touchdown passes. I mean, it is like when you look at Mahomes to this point in his career, the question in terms of like statistically will he catch Brady is really more of a question of longevity.
Right.
Does he just play that? I mean, Brady played forever, but in terms of what he's done to this point age-wise, it's not even close. It's not even a contest.
Right. It's crazy to think about just him and how his contract has worked out. I remember when they gave him that 10-year deal, everyone's like, holy crap. Like this is a long deal for a lot of money. Look, it seemed to work out pretty well so far for what it's garnered. And we talked about last week when we talked about Trevor Lawrence and the quarterback deals going out now, how like Patrick Mahomes not even in like the top 6.
Right.
Top 7, top 8 of quarterback paid per year. Incredible what they did with that contract. And look, I mean, Patrick Mahomes, well-known guy. I'm sure that he's making money off the field as well. I'm sure that that's not his only source of income is those 20 or so weeks during the season. I'm sure he has income coming in other times. But what we were going to talk about before I got off on time, that was kind of weird. A little sidebar there for us. But I want to put this season in perspective, Matt, because it's so easy to get swept up in just the everyday monotony of the rhythm of the off season, the flow of how NFL does things. This season coming up for the Chiefs is a pretty big one. The three-peat, I think that we get so complacent with talking about the three-peat as well, but it's something that has never been done in NFL history.
It never has been done. So, as I always point out when we have this conversation about three-peats, 2 teams have won 3 championships in a row, but nobody's ever done it completely in the Super Bowl era. And ironically, the Packers were the team that did it both times, 1929 through 31. And they won the 1965 NFL title, and then they won the first 2 Super Bowls. And I'm actually in the middle of a piece for SI, which I won't get too far into. It'll be in the NFL preview. Check it out. But I'm working on talking to a player or two from those Packers teams because they did win 3 in a row, even if only 2 were in the Super Bowl era. But I know, like, from talking to those guys previously, that was a big deal. Even then, they wanted to win 3 in a row. That was a big, like, Lombardi harped on that all year long. Now, with that said, we live in a different world than the mid-'60s NFL, okay? The Packers, when they were doing it, I mean, if you want to go to the last season that they did it, because that was the three-peat, so to speak. All right, so 1967, Green Bay Packers. I mean, if you go and look at that year, like, it was a 14-game season, okay? They went 9-4-1. It wasn't... It wasn't a dominant year by their standards by any means, and yet they were able to get it done. But if you look back, at that point in the NFL, there were 16 teams, okay? And while there were 16 teams, one was an expansion team in Atlanta that went 1-12-1, and the other one was a second-year team in New Orleans that went 3-11. Okay, so like realistically, like there were 16 teams or 14 teams that could actually compete. That is a far cry from 32 NFL teams, okay? And none of which that are even close to expansion teams.
Right.
Except maybe Denver. So it's a different league. It's a different world. The scouting is much better. All the player development's much better. I mean, guys back then, they like had real jobs and then played football,
right.
Like fun. It is a much different sport now. If you go and look, so 8 teams in the Super Bowl era have won back-to-back championships. Those Packers teams, the Dolphins in the 70s, the Steelers did it twice in the 70s. So of the 8 teams that did it for Kansas City, 4 of them, it happened in the 70s or earlier. Right? And since then, it was Denver in the 90s, Dallas in the 90s, the Niners in the late 80s, and then the Pats. I mean, the only 2 teams to do it completely in the salary cap era were the Broncos, who ended up getting popped, by the way, for salary cap implications because he cheated, like frauds. And then New England, who also ended up getting popped for a litany of their own problems, not salary cap related. It is extremely hard to do this. And it is unbelievably hard to win 3 Super Bowls in a row, and no team's ever done it. And so the point I wanted to bring up with you on this show is like, do the Chiefs have to approach this season differently than they've approached the first 2? Because on one hand, you'd say, why the hell would you approach it differently? It ended in Super Bowl championships.
Right.
On the other hand, history tells you that if you go about it the exact same way, you're probably going to fall short. So is there a lesson to be learned from those other teams? I think that's the interesting focus of this from my perspective.
I think so too. And if you talk to anyone who wins a Super Bowl the next year, they talk about kind of like that Super Bowl hangover, right? Even just getting to the Super Bowl has a Super Bowl hangover for a lot of teams.
Yes.
And that puts another target on their back, whether it's the NFC champions or the AFC champion. That puts a target. Teams play up. Like there's no doubt about that. If you watch the Chiefs games the past 2 years, there's no doubt that teams play up for the Kansas City Chiefs.
No question.
Look at the Las Vegas Raiders on Christmas Day. That is a prime example. Yeah, the Chiefs didn't play very good, but that was the Raiders' biggest game of the season. And that is very clear. Every game is going to be the other team's biggest game of the season that the Chiefs play. That's just how it's going to be. So it's almost like you do have to approach it differently, as crazy as it does sound, of like, okay, you've done things a certain way to get to a certain point for so long. Now we're saying you have to change that approach because the path is going to be much different, I think, to get there. Teams are going to do whatever they can to make sure the Chiefs don't get 3 in a row, right? I think that's going to be a very big thing, is they don't want that. They want the parity, everything like that. I think you almost have to change. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Matt, but I think you almost have to change just because it's going to be, the landscape is going to be just so different than you faced the last 2 years.
So when you look at their past, let's say the past, I don't want to go 5 years because at some point you start going way back. Let's say the past 3 seasons. So you've won 2 Super Bowls and you went to the AFC title game.
Nope.
The year they went to the AFC title game, they played 3 playoff games, right? They beat Pittsburgh, they beat Buffalo, they lost Cincinnati. The year they beat Philadelphia, they played 3 playoff games, won it all. Last year they played 4. That is 10 extra games. That is more than half of an NFL season.
Yeah.
Okay. While a lot of teams are home sitting on their ass doing nothing, the Chiefs played an extra 10 games. Okay. And a lot of teams may have played 1 extra game, 2 extra games. Chiefs played 10. And the Chiefs have all the extra demands too of like, hey, by the way, you're going to have to play on a Wednesday and a Thursday and a Friday and a Saturday and a bunch of Sundays, some Mondays. And like, we can figure it out between now and Christmas, a Tuesday and a Tuesday morning, and it's going to be in Tokyo. Like, I mean, they have such a unique challenge.
Right.
I think you have to account for that. I think you would be short-sighted to say that's not the case. Like, I do think there's a world this year where they play guys fewer snaps in the regular season. You know, like, I think you have to sit there and maybe at least think about the idea of, you know, if there is a spot in the schedule where they feel like, okay, like, look, there's just an example. Let's say when they play Carolina. Let's say Carolina is a grease fire again. Okay, let's just say that, I mean, look, they're the worst team in football last year. Let's say they are again, just for the argument's sake. Do you sit a couple of your big-time guys? Do you just tell Travis Kelce, hey, man, you know what? We're probably good this week. We don't need you to play this week. I know that the football purists out there, and believe me, I'm one of them, would be like, that is sacrilege.
Right.
Maybe you do it. Maybe that's a game where you go, hey, you know, Chris, listen, you're going to play 20 snaps in this game. We don't need you. Like, we don't need you to win this game. You know, maybe that's a game where you're not going to sit Mahomes because then you could really lose the game. But maybe you play like a bunch of quick game with him and you make sure he doesn't get hit.
Right.
And you just really like, so Travis Kelce by snap count in his career, starting in 2014, which was not technically his rookie year, but his first year playing because he had microfracture surgery in 2013. His snap counts, 66%, 92, 87, 91, 95, 93, 86, 82, 80, 77. His snap counts have decreased by percentage every year since 2018. Now, part of that last year, of course, was he didn't play in a couple of games. So right. that also factors in. That's part of it. 70, like, if I'm the Chiefs, man, this year, it was 77 last year, it was 80 the year prior. Maybe I'm at like 72%, you know, something like that. And like, hey, Noah Gray, you can handle it, bud. Get in there and play a few more snaps. Jared Wiley, if we like you out of camp, hey, go ahead, dude. Play a few more snaps. I mean, I think there is a world, if you're the Chiefs, where you have to at least consider that. And by the way, last year, this might surprise some people, Noah Gray, the last 2 seasons, in fact, 52% of the snaps. Like, he's actually played more than half their snaps offensively each of the last 2 years. Yeah. If I'm the Chiefs, hey, bro, here's 57%.
Right.
You know, and in the playoffs, I don't give a damn if you play Kelce every snap. That's what he's there for. Like, that's fine. He would tell you that. But I think you have to at least consider maybe Justin Reed, like maybe you give more snaps to Brian Cook. Right. You know, maybe you give more snaps to Jamari Connor. You know, I think you have to be smart about it based on all the extra games you've played and a schedule that is extremely unique.
I agree. And that's such a good point that you bring up too about the extra games that the Chiefs have played compared to
a lot
the rest of the whole league, because they have. I mean, even you went back, the 3 years, you could go back to the 2 years that they've been in the Super Bowl prior to that too. And and add those games on there, you're probably looking at a full extra season that these guys have played, and a full extra season that these guys have on their bodies. I think that's one of the aspects of this run that is not necessarily talked about as much, because it's easy just to look at it and not think of them as extra games, right?
Right.
But they are. They are playing the maximum amount of games possible. Truthfully, I think maybe they might have one game in the last 5 years that they didn't actually go to maximum wise, and that was when they lost in the AFC title game, and they didn't go to the Super Bowl.
Right.
And that is an insane thing to think about, that they're playing the most amount of games possible, and still at a high level too. And I think the load management thing is really interesting. You're going to get in. I think I agree with you. I think that's what they should do. I would be kind of shocked if Andy Reid did that.
I agree. I agree with you, but I think Andy really should consider, like, look, man, Travis Kelce is going to be, 35 this season?
Yeah.
And you know what? I know it's a little bit sacrilegious. I'm just going to go out and say it. They should be able to beat the crap out of a lot of these teams with Travis Kelce playing 70% of the snaps. And they should be able to handle these teams if a guy has to miss a game here and there. Like, I'm sorry, their schedule, in terms of its uniqueness, I think is challenging. I do not think it is that challenging in terms of the teams that they play this season. Like, look, it's
absolutely.
It's June 26th. Let's put this on the record, and if I'm wrong, I'll leave my hat. Okay? I got a hat right over there. In fact, it's the same hat you're wearing right now. Like, perfect. They should kick the crap out of everybody in their division. Okay? Yeah. If they play reasonably well, they should annihilate the Chargers, Raiders, and Broncos. Okay? The Chargers have you and me starting at receiver. The Raiders stink. The Broncos might be the worst team in football. If the Chiefs don't go full-on pea pants, they should be 6-0 in that division. At the worst case, 5-1. And then you'll look at the NFC South. There's the worst division in football. None of those teams scare you. I mean, Atlanta's talented, like they're good, I guess, if Cousins is good. The Buccaneers, fine. You get them at home on a Monday night, you win that game. The Saints aren't good.
Right.
The Panthers are horrific. That's 10 of your games. Like 10 of your games are against those teams.
Right.
Okay? Yeah, sure. Look, the Niners are a challenge. The Bills on the road, it's a challenge. Bengals, Ravens are at home. Texans at home. I'm not saying they don't have any hard games. I mean, it's the NFL. They're not going to play 17 teams all to stay.
Right.
But that schedule, if they're even moderately healthy, that should be 12 to 13 wins, and they're not even really breaking all that big of a sweat doing it. Like that, if they're like the Steelers and the Browns, I understand aren't bad teams. The Chiefs should beat both those teams.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't care if they're on the road. The Chiefs play in cold weather too. Ask Miami. Like Russell Wilson, who cares? Right. Deshaun Watson, have you seen Deshaun Watson the last couple of years? I mean, the Chiefs should win those games. You know, so I look at it and I'm like, you've got, if you include those two games, that's 12 games on the schedule. You're looking at it going, yeah, they should win that game. And like, I don't want to say easily, but like they should be a clear favorite to handle that business and win that game. And then the other 5 games, you're not going to lose all 5 of them. They're the Chiefs. Like,
right.
3 of them are in your own building. So you think, I don't know, 2-3, 3-2, maybe you lose a game you shouldn't. Like, that's a team that should win 13 plus and really not like be dying doing it. So if you're Andy, you know, I will say this. I do think that they should really also consider game situations. Like, if you're up 24-3 at halftime against Denver, maybe just dial it back a little bit. Hey, Clyde, you want 10 carries in the second half? Go for it. You know, and by the way, that's not an easy thing to do.
No.
Because players are going to want to play. They're going to be, hey, I want my stats. I want to hit. Like, if I'm Clark Hunt, you know, every year at the beginning of training camp, he gets in front of the team and he talks about their goals and what they want to do and who they want to be. I'll tell you right now, I would tell some of the main guys in this team, like, look, if you have incentives that are tied to playing time or tied to statistics that, are like volume statistics, if you don't get there because we're trying to be smart about this, I will convert that for you. We will pay it. Don't worry about it. Like, if you're sitting there telling Isaiah Pacheco, I'm not saying this is in his contract, it's not. Like, hey, man, you had 1,000 yards rushing, get an extra $1 million. And he clearly is going to get there, but, like, you kind of give, like, 70 carries to Clyde Edwards-Helaire because you're trying to keep him fresh.
Right.
Clark, pay him the money. Like, just do it. It's fine. It's $1 million. It's like a rounding error for you. Just give it to him. Like, I think that maybe get the state of Kansas to give it to him. Like, I that's where, to me, if I'm the Chiefs, I am factoring in all of this stuff going into the season because I think it matters. You're trying to stay fresh against other teams that have not played anywhere near the amount of games that you have played over the last handful of years.
I do think it's interesting, too, you bring up the number of wins. If you look at the AFC number 1 seed last year, the Baltimore Ravens, they won 13 games last year, got the number 1 seed. I'm going to go back to 2022.
Chiefs won 14 in 2022, and we're the 1 seed.
So you're looking at kind of 13 games is kind of like the bar usually of what you need to get to win that number 1 seed. Like you mentioned, the Chiefs won 14. The Bills won 13, didn't quite get there. That's the bar. And we're talking about 12 games that the Chiefs should win. And really, they should be favored in all of their games too. If on the Vegas odds, I can't think of one that they wouldn't be favored.
I think the only one they're not favored in
Niners?
Cisco.
Yeah. Okay.
They're a point-and-a-half dog in that game, if I remember correctly. I think every other game they're favored. And look, to that point, every season is different for a million reasons. But, like, if you look at their recent run, like their dynastic run here they've had, the Chiefs division has never been great, but it's always at least had teams that are, like, capable. Like, the Chargers have always been, like, decent. The Raiders have had some years now where they've been decent. Right. Yeah, Denver, same thing. Look around the AFC right now and make the case that the Chiefs aren't in the worst division.
Yeah.
Like, I defy anybody to do that. In the comment section, go ahead, go nuts, right as you're making fun of us. Like, hit me. Like, what is the case that they're not in the worst division? Because when you look at the AFC, okay, the AFC East has 3 teams I think we can all agree on could reasonably make the playoffs.
Yeah.
The AFC North, any of those teams can make the playoffs.
100%.
The AFC South, I think you could at least argue, bare minimum, 2 of them. Okay, with Houston and Jacksonville. And you could even argue Indianapolis. I think even I would argue Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. The AFC West is 1 team.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you really want to stretch and say the Chargers, but that would be the biggest stretch of any team we just mentioned in the AFC.
Yeah.
Okay? The Chiefs, there is no argument they're not playing in the easiest division in the AFC. And they play the worst division in the NFC. Like, the only team that I think can reasonably challenge them if they win 13, 14 games is Cincinnati, and everything would have to go right. And the only reason I say that is because they play a last place schedule. Right. But the Bengals have to go to Kansas City. They have to play the Ravens twice. They got to play the Steelers twice. They got to play they got to play the Browns twice. And the other side of this coin too is, and we've talked about this, I think the first 2 games of the season are monumental for the Chiefs.
Absolutely.
If you win those 2 games, you are in such an unbelievable position. Like, if people agree with us about the 12 games that we think they should win, like the games that you're like, okay, those games, they better win, or that's kind of a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
If you beat the Bengals and the Ravens starting the year, you have 3 hard games left.
Yeah.
And you're 2-0. Like, your schedule is a clown show most of the rest of the way. And on top of that, you now have the breakers on those teams. And if they win those 2 games, let's say they win those 2 games, they go 13-4. That means that the Bengals, so the Bengals would have lost that game. And let's just say for shits and giggles that the Bengals and Ravens split their games. Mm-hmm. Okay. That means that the Bengals would be 1-2 in those 3 games. Same for the Ravens, by the way, so it holds true for both of them. The rest of the way, if the Chiefs were to go 13-4, the rest of the way, the Bengals or the Ravens would only be able to lose 1 more game. the rest of the year, or they can't catch Kansas City. So they would have to do. I'm just doing the math, man. What would they have to do? They'd have to be 13-1 in their other 14 games.
Yeah,
have fun. Good luck. Good luck with that. Like that's why to me those games are so critical early in the year.
Yeah.
You win those games, you have those teams in a death spiral for the number one seed for the year even starts because of how hard their slate is.
Mm-hmm.
You have the tiebreaker. You just played two of your hardest games.
Right.
Like, you could argue other than San Francisco, you just played your two hardest games the entire season.
Yeah.
So, to me, I think the Chiefs, I just think you got to pick your spots a little bit this year for the Chiefs. I really do.
Also, on the other side of that coin there, too, I think if the Chiefs lose either one of those games, it's not the end of the world either. I still think that they can.
I think if you split, you're okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It just makes it a little bit more challenging to be the number one.
For sure. It is crazy that schedule is, as we talk about, when you look at the strength of schedule, I think it's middle of the road in terms of strength of schedule, even though they play those teams that they don't, that aren't particularly good. But in terms of the way that it's scheduled, is less than ideal because they do have that early bye week, which is going to be a killer, I think, especially in a season as we've harped on already. They've played a lot of games. They're going to be playing a lot of games this season, and they have a week 6 bye week. Insanely early for this team. And they also have a stretch where they play, 3 games in 11 days or something like that in December. Yeah. So, that's going to be a tough stretch. All those teams, I think the Texans might be one of them, which the Texans, tough team. That'll be a tough team. But again, there's some unknown there with the Texans, right? We think they're going to be good this year. We don't know how that's going to work out. It's wildly interesting, especially when you look at how the schedule lays out. The Chiefs got a really good path in front of them. And let's talk about the roster a little bit. I guess let's take a break first, and then we'll talk about the roster a little bit. I want to talk about some of the 2023 draft picks, the draft picks that were drafted in Kansas City. I want to talk about if we think they're going to have a sophomore slump or if they're going to have a sophomore jump coming up right after this.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Welcome back into That Football Show. Hey, look, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, those are the 2 biggest ones people listen to podcasts on. Make sure to give a rating and a review. We appreciate the 5-star ratings. And look, if you're going to leave some time to leave a review about That Football Show, I'll read it right here on this podcast. Apple Podcast, I think, is where I can see it. I don't know if I can see the Spotify ones. I think you just give it the 5-star on Spotify. I don't think you can actually give reviews on Spotify. I believe you're right, yes. So I think you can just rate it. If you leave a 5-star review mentioning That Football Show, I will read it live on the podcast. We appreciate everyone's support.
You didn't put it in access personally.
Yeah, as long as it's 5 stars. You could say something terrible.
Right, it's fine.
Yeah, you could say this show sucks. I don't know why I listened to it 5 stars and I'd still read it.
That's right.
Look, I know a lot of times people get on the internet to say bad things. I like to, when we get on the internet, to say good things about the people. So the internet is notoriously a good place to say good things, man.
Yes. Especially Twitter, which is really an uplifting. Whenever I'm feeling like, I need a little bit of a lift, I go on Twitter. Now, it's like, Twitter, though, Twitter is like our generation's nightly news. Where,
yeah, for sure.
Because I always laugh when people like my parents, God love them, but they'll, they think, oh yeah, social media, and they're not wrong. Social media is successful, right?
For sure.
But does anyone else remember the nightly news and you turn on the news and the first thing, mother of 8 kills all their kids and drowns them? Oh my God. And then it's 40 minutes of the worst crap you've ever heard in your life. And then they'd be an adult got married today on Staten Island. Jesus Christ. Is there nothing good happening? It's just, the nightly news was always good and still is good. Nowadays, though, there's not the night. There is a nightly news, but there are these news organizations that they're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So
right, yeah.
Obviously, I remember as a kid. This is a complete aside, but it's June 26th. I remember as a kid when like you saw a breaking news bar on television, and you'd immediately be, oh damn, okay. Like, or like if you heard like ABC News special report, like, oh boy, right? Like, what do we cut? And then you also be pissed because you'd be like, man, if we're cutting out of Prices right now. It better be something good, you know. And then as a kid, like there'd be nothing worse, and then you'd be like, it's the State of the Union address tonight. And you'd be like, oh my God, it's the only thing on television for an hour. But now, like I see a breaking news thing, and I don't even blink because it's always breaking. Like on every news station, everything's breaking constantly. Like, you know, oh, this happened to this political figure. And it's like, this has been breaking for 6 months. Right. It's no longer breaking. Take the banner down. You know, it's and by the way, this happens in sports too, where
100%.
You know, breaking news: Tim Tebow's at Jets practice. And you're like, yeah, it's not breaking. He's on the team, and they had a practice at 9:00 this morning. I figured it would be more breaking if he wasn't there. Would it not be? Like, it's just, yeah. We've gone off the rails as a society. But yes, if you're going to Twitter, yeah, always a good place to find uplifting, wholesome content.
Right. You just made me think about Tim Tebow being a tight end. Was Jacksonville Jaguars when he flipped over to tight end? He wore like 85.
Yes.
That was like a mandatory minute. He didn't make it to training camp.
That was terrible. I went to school about an hour and 20 minutes away from when the Jets used to hold training camp up in Cortland, SUNY Cortland. I was there the year that he was with the Jets. And I got to tell you, do you remember there was like that famous, like it was pouring raining and he was running shirtless in the rain and Sports Center. Yeah, I was there. And I remember I was with my buddy and we were just hysterically laughing, like for what must have been 20 minutes, like just with an umbrella, just like look at this. All the cameras are on. We were just laughing, and then like it was nothing but that for a week.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's it's kind of like as a Knicks fan when insanity happened.
Yes.
And people just lost their minds.
Yeah, they did.
And as a Knicks fan, I was like, look, this is cool and all. They still suck. I remember I was really the only Knicks fan in the world who didn't care at all about insanity. I'm like, awesome, great. They're still terrible. Like nothing's changing that fact. Although now we got Mikal Bridges, in which case,
that's true. You guys are basically Villanova now.
Fantastic, great. But we also don't have to go to Philly, so it's the best of both worlds. We got all the Villanova kids, and I don't have to go down to Philadelphia. So it's a huge win for all parties involved.
You're just missing Jay Wright. That's it.
Yes, they really should just start bringing in guys like who were like bench warmers on Villanova, just for the hell of it. It's like bring him in.
For vibes, you know.
Yes.
So do it for the locker room chemistry.
Well, they had a guy last year. They actually traded to the Pistons as part of a deal for Ryan. I always screw his name up because and I shouldn't because it's his Italian name. I think I'd get it right. You know, like Artavi. Oh God, I'm gonna butcher this thing to no end. I'm not even gonna bother. He played.
I see it. I see his name. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, it's an alphabet soup right there.
Yeah, and it's so bad because again, it's my heritage. I should do this. No problem. My grandparents would be ashamed. But he never like played for them. He was just sit on the bench.
Mm-hmm.
There was a whole story Fred Katz wrote in The Athletic how his whole contribution to the team was he would watch intently to see if a guy had a 3-second violation, and then let's say it was Joel Embiid, like it was in the paint 3 seconds. Would scream at the top of his lungs, 3 seconds! And, like, they got, like, I forget, Cats went back and counted up, like, they got 14 calls based off that. It was incredible. Like, and after he wrote that story, everybody became aware of it. So, like, you'd be watching on TV and you would just, like, you'd hear it. And as a kid, like, I always thought, like, as a fan, like, oh, is this some
right.
jag off 4 rows up? No, it's a bench warmer screaming. It was a great story, and I'm hoping he comes back this year, just as you said, for vibes.
Looking at his basketball reference page, the pronunciation says Archidiakono.
Okay, yes. He I hope he comes back this offseason. I don't care if he scores a point ever. It was incredible. It was so fun. Like once I knew that little tidbit was out there, like listen for it.
Yeah.
Hear him just scream the top of his line. Like, all right, there you go. Man, it was contributing.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love role players like that. Speaking of role players, sophomore slump, sophomore jump, with the with the Kansas City Chiefs. I guess let's start with the first round pick. Felix Anudike-Uzomah have an interesting situation in terms of the defensive line room. They brought legitimately everyone back. They practically have a copy and paste of last year's defensive line. What does that mean for Felix?
So I'm split on this. On one hand, I've talked to people in the building who will tell you that they are really high on him. On the other hand, like, you pay Mike Dana $24 million, it kind of speaks to, like, is he going to be playing a whole hell of a lot here?
Right.
That said, Menahu signed for this season, and Dana moves all over the place. So I do think there's a world where he can play quite a bit. Now, again, is he going to play a lot this year? I think he's rotational. If you look at his stats in a very limited sample size, he actually was, like, pretty productive in terms of, like, quarterback hits, causing some disruption in the backfield. Look, I think he will be a useful rotational player this year, which is, I guess, a jump. So I will go jump. I think by the end of this year, we will feel good about his development.
I think that's all you can ask for, especially in this situation. It is going to be really interesting to see how they do use him, especially with Charles Omenihu. He look, as much as he wants you to believe on Twitter, I don't know if he's going to be back for the first game. I would be genuinely surprised if he does. Look, if he is, that is incredible. That is a great recovery. I would be kind of shocked. Again, I think a lot of Felix Anudike-Uzomah's snaps are going to rely on Charles Omenihu. Last year was the same way. Charles Omenihu had a 6-game suspension, and you got to see Felix have a decent amount of snaps. But as soon as he came back, that snap count kind of plummeted. I think it's going to rely on how long that Charles Omenihu is going to be out, for how long he's going to be. I'm interested to see his development once the pads do come on, everything like that. Look, in the Super Bowl, he made a good play. The Niners did forget to block him, and the running back ran right into him. So I hope you make that play. Look, again,
right.
He's got to execute right in that situation. I understand, like, he's got to still tackle, still got to bring him down.
Right.
There's plenty of guys that would miss in that situation. He still did it. I'm not knocking him at all in that.
Oh, sure.
I think that there's obviously room for improvement there. I want to be bullish on Felix Anudike-Uzomah. I really do, and to see his development. I just don't know how all that's going to shake out with, as you mentioned, the Mike Dana contract and the re-signing, how much that's going to play into it. He doesn't necessarily have the positional versatility that a Mike Dana does have, or Chris Jones does have, to go inside out. So that it also might hinder his snap count a little bit. But I do think that Felix is one of the guys that would love to see a jump for.
Yeah, and I think, again, it'll be like an incremental jump. I don't think it's going to be a huge jump. Look, I don't think you can look at him as like the traditional first-round pick where, like, it's like, hey, he's got to produce right away. He's not a traditional first-round pick. He was really young coming out of college, and they took him at a position of strength.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't take him at a position where, like, this guy's got to play now. That's not what they did. And that's because they're so freaking loaded that they were like, well, what the hell? We'll take this guy, and if in 3 years from now he's really good, that's great. Like, that's how they viewed it when they took him, and that's how they view it now. So I think he'll be better this year. I think he'll play more this year, but I don't think he's going to all of a sudden be a Pro Bowler.
Right. Last year he played 20% of the snaps, 20.04% according to Pro Football Reference here. Do you think he gets more than 20%?
Yeah, I think it's slightly more. So if you look, like, last year, to your point, so I'll just bring up his game log real quick. All right, so he played when Menahu missed the first 6 games of the year.
Right.
He was at 27%, 24, 49, 22, 35. And then after that, he didn't play more than 16% of any game.
Yeah.
Which was no more than 10 snaps until the game that meant nothing, of course, which was the Week 17 game when he had 73% of the snaps. And by the way, In that game, he had 2 tackles for loss. I'm not going to sit here and go crazy about it. I think you're asking a lot more than is reasonable of him to play like 40% of the snaps. I mean, look around. So I think 25%, something like that, maybe approaching 30, and I think a lot of that depends on the men who missed time, which we expect him to.
I agree. I would say slightly more than 20%. I think I'm with you on there. I think it's going to be slightly more than 20%. I don't think it's going to be a ton more than 20%.
Right.
But I do think it'll be there. Rashee Rice, round 2 pick. I got ahead of myself. I saw Jamari Connor and I got excited. Let's talk about Rashee Rice. I think it's an interesting conversation to have because he is probably missing half of the season, right? If we just condition ourselves to think he's probably getting suspended for 8 games. Do you think that he takes a sophomore jump in those 8 games? Hard to kind of jump from what he had last year.
I mean, this one's the easiest one there is to me. It's slump. I mean, we opened this little segment talking about these second-year guys and what's going to happen. Well, he is very likely not going to play a lot of the year.
Right.
His offseason has been nothing short of an absolute tire fire in every conceivable fashion. So, and on top of that, by the way, they have a lot more weapons now.
Yep.
So I don't think he's seen the ball nearly as much. Like, what happens if he misses the first 8 games of the year and Xavier Worthy is electrifying? Then what? Guess what, man? Like, you're the 4th weapon on the team now. I'm not predicting that. Like, I don't think that's going to be the case because Worthy's a rookie receiver on the Chiefs. Like, the odds are that's not going to happen.
For sure.
But, like, there's a worry. Look, what if it happens? What if Xavier Worthy comes in and he is just, hey, we got to play this guy. This guy is killing people. Guess what? You're wide receiver 3 and option 4 now. Like, that's what happened because you decide to go out and miss a big chunk of the year with your actions this offseason. Yeah, I think it has to be a slump. It has to be. I'd be shocked if he has a jump based on everything that's going on.
Rashee Rice did something last year that is uncommon for Andy Reid rookie wide receivers, right?
Yes.
He nearly had 1,000 yards. And like that does not happen with Andy Reid rookie wide receivers. Even going back to Philly, the Philly days, like that doesn't happen. So it is hard to say that he takes a jump from there without playing. Not going to play half a season. So naturally, statistically, he will take a step back. He played 55% of the snaps last year. As a wide receiver, as a rookie wide receiver in the system, I mean, I think he was kind of forced to play 55% of the snaps. If you look at the other guys that they had playing wide receiver, that's somewhat impressive for a rookie to come in there and play 55% of the snaps for an Andy Reid offense.
Yeah.
And I think that I say this to kind of, and you mentioned this too, to kind of set our expectations for Xavier Worthy, right? I think we see what Rashee Rice did last year, and everyone thinks, Xavier Worthy's going to come in, he's going to have 1,000 yards, and it'll be all hunky-dory, it'll be perfect. I don't think that's what the expectation should be. I think if you can tell yourself that what Rashee Rice did last year is abnormal to the norm, and say, hey, look, if Xavier Worthy has 500 yards,
yes,
great year for Xavier Worthy as a rookie in this system. I think that 500 yards for Xavier Worthy would be great. But look, I mean, it's hard not to say slump with him just because the nature of him, he is going to miss games. So there's no doubt about that. He is going to miss games for what he did, and it sucks, right? Like he had everything, as we mentioned, a very historic year last year for rookie wide receivers in terms of Chiefs history too, and Andy Reid history. So like he had it all, and he's kind of blowing it. But we'll see how he responds after this and everything like that. We don't need to have a whole moral high ground conversation about Rashee Rice here, but I think that we are in lockstep there. And another one here, I think a big one, Wanya Morris. he finds himself in the middle of a tackle battle right now. Look, he came in and he played pretty well to begin, and as he got more tape on him, teams started to kind of figure him out a little bit. Max Crosby figured him out, certainly, in that Christmas Day game. It was not pretty. So what do you think about Wanya Morris, especially when you hear reports, Nate Taylor saying Kings is getting a lot of the reps so far in minicamp?
Yeah. I think slump only because I think, look, if you draft the guy in the second round at that position, you're not drafting that guy to sit there.
For sure.
Absolutely. That doesn't mean he can't win the job, but like they drafted Joe Mattei to play.
Yeah.
That's why I drafted him. They did not draft him like, oh, like we'll see what happens. Like their internal expectation is like he wins that job. So I would say slump, really not based off anything Wanya Morris did wrong. More just I think their draft class tells you that they would like to see that position bolstered, and bolstered by a guy who's coming in with a better collegiate pedigree, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that makes sense just because of the situation. It's a great point. You don't draft a guy in the second round to sit around and not do anything. Now let's talk about Shamari Connor, a 4th-round pick. I think last year was an interesting progression for Shamari Connor because in camp, I think you had Dave Merritt come out there and say, like, yeah, I mean, well, he got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And he's done that with a couple of guys, right, in training camp. And at the end of the year, he was playing really well. So what do you think about Shamari Connor? Do you think he's a slump or a jump?
I think he jumps so high, actually comes through the ceiling like the Kool-Aid man. He is my biggest, I think he is going to be a very, very important and very good player for them this season. And look, the reason being, I remember talking to people inside the building where they drafted him, and the thought process was, hey, look, this guy's a great special teams player, and that's why we took him.
Yeah.
They did not take him with the thought of like, hey, he's going to play a lot of defensive snaps this year for this team. Like that was not the thought process at all. And then he started to play a lot of snaps because they needed him. Cook got hurt, and Edwards got hurt in that game in Buffalo. And I mean, you want to talk about a baptism by fire. Edwards got hurt on the first defensive play of the game and didn't come back. And they were like, all right, kid, it's you. Have fun. I mean, they were just like, we have nobody else.
Right.
Cook's hurt. Edwards is hurt. Justin Reed's the only safety we got. Deion Bush is a safety, but let's be real, he's a special teams guy. Like, right. You're it, bud. Get in there. In Buffalo, national TV, divisional games, Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, Shakir, Kincaid. Hey, man, go for it. Good luck to you. I mean, that's about as big of a spot as you could be put in, and he was great. My understanding is that this is going to be a year he does more. He's going to play some slot corner. He's going to play some free safety. They're going to move him around quite a bit. I think he is going to be a very important player to this team.
Yeah. I
think he is going to be very much of a roamer, so to speak, for the Chiefs. And I think Noah Gray is probably the most underrated offensive player on the team. I think Connor, we might have a conversation at the end of this year going, he might be the most underrated defense player on the team. Like a guy that really is important in a lot of facets. So I think he's going to take a huge jump.
The positional versatility is huge. I think he played a lot in the slot last year too, if I'm remembering correctly. I think that's going to be big when it comes to replacing L'Jarius Sneed in the aggregate. Because I talked about this with Matt Hamilton of Up and Adams. You're not going to find one guy to replace L'Jarius Sneed, right? You kind of have to replace him in the aggregate, like Moneyball style.
Yeah.
You got to get a bunch of guys to do what he can do, and if Trent McDuffie has said that he can play outside. He wants to play outside. He can play outside. If he wants to do that, have some guys play in the slot. Look, Trent McDuffie also a lead in the slot. By the way, like he's very good at that. I think that there are a lot of guys that can come in and fill different roles and different facets that L'Jarius Sneed did. I think Shamari Connor's a part of that. You're obviously talking about Jalen Watson as well, Joshua Williams, those guys coming in, stepping up, taking a step forward. But look, you're talking about a rookie who played 28% of the snap in Steve Spagnuolo's defense, who does not like to play rookies in that defense. He, again, as you mentioned, hand was kind of forced in some of that in terms of injuries and how they all shook up. But I mean, that's just for the regular season, though, when you're talking about 28% of the defensive snaps. So I do think Shamari Connor can be a very interesting piece for this team, a chess piece for Steve Spagnuolo to use in a lot of different situations, a way for them to make their looks a lot more multiple in the back end. Yeah. It's going to be I anticipate a big year for him, too. I think it'll be a very exciting season for Shamari Connor.
I agree. I think he's going to be excellent for them this season.
Last two picks of the 2023 draft, I don't really know if we need to talk a whole lot about B.J. Thompson. He was a practice squad guy last year, obviously had the medical emergency. Thankful he's alive and all of that, and the fast responding for all those. We don't necessarily need to talk about him because he didn't really play last year. He's on the practice squad. Nick Jones, the other guy who was a special teamer. Well, I think people are high on him, but I don't necessarily think we need to talk about if there's a slump or a jump for a guy who, I do think was on the practice squad a lot of the year as well. So yeah, I think those are the big ones for the 2022 draft class. Crazy to think that that 2021 draft class of Nick Bolton and Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey, they're up for contract extensions. We'll see how all of those shake out.
Wait till next offseason when we get to the 2022 class. There are about 8 different guys are going to be warranting extensions.
That's going to be a tough one. Maybe we can have that conversation next week of just like thinking ahead of like, okay, who would you extend here? What?
Beach is going to be like Oprah giving out cars. Yeah. Right. I mean, Beach is just going to be, you get one and you get one. I mean, it's going to be, that class is so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, obviously McDuffie is the best player from it, but
right.
Then Karlaftis is also really good. And then there's a whole slew of like, what do you do? Like Brian Cook and Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson and Isaiah Pacheco is going to shatter everybody's brain because you're going to have people. You think the Nick Bolton commentary is good? Wait till we get to Isaiah Pacheco, where people are screaming to pay him because everybody loves the guy. And then there's the other half of the community. It's like, well, he's a running back and he plays really hard downhill and like he's going to get hurt. That is going to be insane. No matter what they do, half of the fan base will be thrilled and the other half will have the pitchforks out.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that conversation. There's no way they pay him, right?
I don't think they'll pay him. But I'll tell you, what would be the best is if Veach, like the day they all become extension eligible, if the first extension he gives out is Sky Moore. just don't really stick it to everybody.
That is what's lost in that 2022 draft class is that there were some bangers in there, and then Sky Moore.
Well, when you look at that class, we can I know wrap it here, but like when you look at that Chiefs class, I'm going to pull it up really quick so I don't forget anybody else. There's a lot of picks that year.
They did pick a lot of players.
There's a lot of dudes. Yeah, I'm trying to like make sure I'm not missing anybody here. Okay, so round 1, Trent McDuffie. Round 1, George Karlaftis. Round 2, pick 54, Sky Moore. Round 2, Brian Cook. Round 3, I didn't mention him earlier, Leo Chenal. Round 4, Joshua Williams. Round 5, Darian Kennard. Round 7, Jalen Watson. Round 7, 251 overall, Isaiah Pacheco. And then round 259, actually round 259, might as well have been 259. Round 7, pick 259, Najee Johnson. Like, the absolute hilarity would be if they were like, Sky Moore, first up. Just be. But
it's probably because Sky Moore would accept any extension.
That's what it is. Yes.
Offer. We'll give you a vet min deal for a year. Deal.
Done, yeah. But I'll tell you, man, you're gonna have a couple guys like Chenal is gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
Jalen Watson will be interesting.
The Bolden thing is gonna make the Chenal contract.
There's going to be a lot. Like, I think everybody agrees they should pay McDuffie and Karlaftis. Like, I don't think there's a real argument there.
Yeah.
But, like, Watson, Pacheco, Cook, Chenal, all guys were absolutely worthy of a second contract. And, like, a couple of them, I'm sure, will get second contracts in Kansas City. Which ones will they be? And I can't wait for that argument when it's just like, it's the middle of May and there's nothing going on. And somebody on Twitter is like, you're an idiot if you'd pay Leo Chenal. And then it just sparks like an 1,000 comment thread of people screaming at each other. It'd be good. It'd be fun.
Yeah. Look forward to those days, truthfully. At least it'd give us something to talk about. We do appreciate you guys listening to the show here, as we are in the absolute dead of June. Appreciate you guys listening, sticking with us. Hey, make sure to give us a 5-star rating and review as well on Apple Podcasts. As I said earlier, I'll read it on the show. Leave a review mentioning that football show. I'll talk about it. We'll talk about it on the show. We'll discuss your grammatical errors too, if there are any in them. We'll roast you if you want us to. We'll also do that. We'll give you that option as well.
Yeah.
But I think that's gonna do it. We got a good 55 minutes out of this, Matt. I'm surprised that we talked this long about it on June 26th about abstract ideas.
I'm calling Kissel right after this, since I don't want double.
There you go. That's going to do it for this week's edition of That Football Show. Thanks to our sponsors, Holiday Distillery and Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon. Make sure to go check them out. For Matt Verderame, I'm Tucker Franklin. We'll talk to you guys next week.